with full clarity. I felt what I can only describe as a force. And the reason I use the word force is because it was like a rush of wind, except it was not on my skin. It wasn't physical, but I felt it. It was like a whoosh, and it came in from the center of my back and kind of just, I don't know, it's so hard to articulate entirely with words, but I felt this force, this strong energy that kind of encapsulated my body. And then it concentrated itself right here in my heart space. It was just here. And it was doing these circles around my heart space, almost like, are you noticing? Are you aware? And as it paused at my shoulder, it started moving slowly down my arm. But again, it's like on the inside of my body, this force, and into my hand, which was holding my dad's hand, through my fingers. And then I just knew that force went into my dad too. And I gave him a huge hug. And I said, Dad, I don't know what that was, but I know you felt it too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Channel Within. I'm excited to be speaking with Amber Kasic this morning. Thank you, Amber, for being here with me today.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I always love sharing on podcasts just about this topic of spirituality and death and dying.
Awesome. So, you're an evidential medium and an end of life coach, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about life before?
Well, I have been just a very normal person living a very normal life. I spent about 15 to 17 years teaching in high school second language instruction, sometimes ELA, English language. And, am a mom and a wife and a daughter and all the normal things. Live in the Midwest. I love my nature and Lake Michigan. Did a lot of traveling in my life, which has been lovely and really, looking back now, I know is a part of my kind of soul essence of who I am because that wasn't just traveling just to travel, really living and working with a lot of different cultures for different reasons. And really spending the first 20 of my adult years just growing my perspective on what it means to be human.
That's awesome. I did hear you talk about being in Peru. Was that part of the teaching curriculum? How did that happen?
So I'm going to have a huge smile on my face because this is the part of teaching that I really genuinely miss the most. As I said, I taught second language. So I would teach Spanish to American students who wanted to learn to speak another language. And I also would sometimes teach English to second language learners that were here in the US. And whenever I was teaching, I was always really looking to be a bridge to other cultures and, make what we're learning really applicable. So in those few years when I was traveling with students to Peru, we had a partnership with a little school down there, and we would just do lots of different projects together. The mothers of this school were very in tune with their indigenous heritage. And many of them, their main form of income was weaving in very much the Incan Quechua tradition. And so when we would go down there, I would buy from them and bring back a whole bunch of their weavings, and we would sell them in our school store and just educate people around, well, students really, around the different ways that we can consume goods, right? Um, and there's a difference sometimes between buying things made in a factory and buying things that are handmade by an indigenous group. So I was really just always looking to bring the world to life and give my students those real world learning experiences.
That sounds really cool. A partnership with a school in Peru. And in Michigan. How fascinating.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I think my that is one of my favorite projects. But right before I left teaching, um, we did this amazing project that was sort of a worldwide collaboration. We had schools in the Netherlands, Puerto Rico, Mexico, my school, there's Panama, there's a number of schools from around the world. And we all did a series of a project called A Beautiful Mundo, which means a beautiful world. And the idea was, what does it mean to be fill in the blank with your what's the word I'm looking for? What does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be Mexican? What does it mean to be Panamanian? You know, that sort of thing. And students in groups put together videos and different projects to kind of answer that question. And then we all uploaded them to a website together. So we each had our own page, and then we would Skype with each other and talk about our projects. So as you can see, I'm very much about, again, learning and just discussing what does it mean to be human across cultures, ethnicities, language barriers, all the things.
That's really beautiful. And were you religious or spiritual growing up, Amber?
I grew up going to Catholic church, although I wouldn't say that my family was devout Catholic by any means. But I did go to Catholic church and went to catechism as a real little kid. Continued going to church in high school, not necessarily every week, but fairly often. But it was in my 20s that I really just started to kind of, I guess, just branch out from Catholicism in general. I started just not feeling so aligned with that particular faith system, and started attending other types of Christian churches. And it was right around the age, it was at the age of 30. Actually, I was in Peru with a group of students, and we were having a moment where we were working with an indigenous group that lived in the Amazon and they lived off of the Amazon. I mean, they were amazing, just amazing humans to learn from. But the organization has sort of arranged those couple of days where we could work and live and just sort of learn from them. Um, you know, they organized that and put us with other couple of groups that were there. And so there were two women from a Lutheran church, and I at the time was attending a Lutheran church, who were there as a part of our group. And it sort of gave me this outside perspective where, you know, I was there with my students, not for a religious reason, to specifically learn from a whole other life way or style of life, a whole other way of being human. And I wanted them to soak up as much of the humanity as they could. And I was watching these lovely women who were here from the Lutheran church. They were absolutely lovely people. They were really there to bring the knowledge of Jesus to the indigenous people. And I understand that. To them, they were bringing their own beauty, doing it with grace, kindness, and love. But what I could see from the outside perspective, watching it all happen, was my students were asking questions, seeking to understand, taking that back in the evening, reflecting on their own beliefs, thoughts, and perspectives about life, not religion, but just about life in general. And these women were just here to be nice and try to impart themselves onto this group with grace and kindness and love. But what happens when you look at that side by side is these women learned nothing, or what seemed to be to not really be anything, to integrate into their own experience, or not to integrate into their own experience, but to create reflection and discussion. And then in that, when you're looking at it side by side, I kind of started to realize this is everything wrong with being human right here in this mindset, not because it's wrong to share who we are with somebody else, but when our intent, deep down, our intent is, I want these people to be different humans. I want them to experience beliefs that are different, and I'm going to try to put my beliefs on this group. What we're doing is we're creating a lot of separateness. And we might be not even intending to telling a whole other group, you are not as worthy as me because you don't share this belief, and I'm worried about you. Um, and when I saw that from that outside perspective, it was zero about judging anybody and their reasons for being there or what they were trying to do to share their heart. I understood. But I really saw it as this is a big problem with how we human. It fosters separateness. And it was in that moment that I didn't lose my personal faith. I just stopped going to church. I didn't want to be a part of something that even unintentionally was creating separateness.
I really love your perspective because it appears as if the woman in their intent of kindness just lost that missed opportunity to really um, learn maybe and participate fully, while the kids did the opposite. And they're closer to source at that age, the kids. And so it seems like it was a little bit easier for them to integrate and to really participate fully. And by you observing, that was also probably for your spiritual development. So
Yeah.
that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and what I was really witnessing was genuine connection
Yes.
versus just kindness and sharing, but no connection.
Yes.
It's the genuine connection that changes the love that we have with one another, including in our differences, how we see each other, and again, how we can take someone else's thoughts, beliefs, experiences, and let that reflect back on our own. It doesn't mean we become their thoughts, experiences, and perspectives, but it creates a more wholeness as a human because we're having a genuine interest to seek and understand.
Yeah. Can you talk about the day you became a medium then, if we can transition to that, or
I
how
don't know if
your
there's a one day. It really
okay.
happened over the course of a year or so. There was
Okay.
no intention to become a medium. That's not something that was anywhere even kind of on my radar. It was, my dad's passing on November 1st of 2020 really was a catalyst. It wasn't that he died and I suddenly became a medium, but it was that as he passed, we had a beautiful shared death experience together, which is not a term I had ever heard before. Of course, we know near death experiences. And most of us know and have just heard of really odd things happening at someone's passing, right? Like lights going on and off, or like in the case of an aunt that I had who passed away. I wasn't there, but my mom was. The moment she died, the garage door kept opening and closing, opening and closing. It seemed uncontrollable out of nowhere. We have these things, these external physical things. I had an experience with my dad that for me was just, I call it for a while, otherworldly. And in that experience, I was holding his hand. It was about 12 hours before he actually took his last breath. But I know now, years later, reflection later, mediumship moments later, this is really when his soul was really transitioning. We think we're here fully until we take our last breath. And I now know that is just not true. There's a lot more transition going on than we realize. In that moment of this otherworldly experience, I was holding my dad's hand and I was just in a real state of presence, even down to I can remember hearing just the seconds go by on the clock, one after the other. And I was having a moment of sadness because I knew I will never hear my dad's voice again. Like he had been unconscious now for 2 days. We've already had our last conversation. In essence, he's not here, except he is. He's still breathing. His hand is still warm. He's still my dad. And in that, I just sort of surrendered to that space of he's here, but he's not here. And all I had was just unconditional love and just that real felt presence holding his hand. And in that moment of presence, I started to see just like hues of purple kind of doing swirls in my mind's eye. Uh, it was odd. I just thought, well, that's interesting. It's not something you normally experience. And then I felt a warmth, just sort of like a tingling warmth, start at the top of my head and slowly go down my body all the way to my toes. And I remember having the thought, oh, the sun must be coming in the window and, just kind of playing tricks on me, so to speak. But then with full clarity, I felt what I can only describe as a force. And the reason I use the word force is because it was like a rush of wind, except it was not on my skin. It wasn't physical, but I felt it. It was like a whoosh, and it came in from the center of my back and kind of just, I don't know, it's so hard to articulate entirely with words, but I felt this force, this strong energy that kind of encapsulated my body. And then it concentrated itself right here in my heart space. It was just here. And that was not a word I would ever use before, center of my chest. Now I call it the heart space. And as I was aware of it, it was moving in slow circles like this. I mean, this is not any kind of feeling I have ever had before in my life. Not like a little bubble or a little weird thing that you get in your lung or something. I've never, it felt like a force, like an expansive wind that didn't have limits, but wasn't physical. That's the best way I can explain it. And it was doing these circles around my heart space, almost like, are you noticing? Are you aware? And as my brain is catching up, yes, I am aware, I am noticing. And then it moved to my shoulder and paused. And I'm just following that with my awareness. It was so new, I couldn't judge it. I've never had this feeling before, so I could just kind of be in the moment. And as it paused at my shoulder, it started moving slowly down my arm. But again, it's like on the inside of my body, this force, and into my hand, which was holding my dad's hand, through my fingers. And then I just knew that force went into my dad too. I knew it just because I knew it. And I gave him a huge hug. And I said, Dad, I don't know what that was, but I know you felt it too. And you take all that love and light in you, which honestly, I don't even know why those words were coming out of my mouth. I was a very loving person, but the whole like peace, love, light, no, that was not me. But I said, take all that love and light in your core with you. And again, those words just poured out of my mouth. But what I was really saying is, and this is for all of us, in our essence, in our most essential essence, in our core, we are nothing but wholeness, goodness, connection, love. That's what I was saying. Take all of that with you. I felt it. I just felt the essence of that. Leave all the old news behind. And what that means for all of us is the junk, the stuff that we are, the conditioning, the things we do that's a result of our own hurts in life and our quirks and all that stuff. That's just old news. That's like the human stuff that does not move beyond with our essence. So Dad, take all that love and light in your core with you and leave the old news behind. It's okay if you have to go now. I love you very much. And that was really one of my very last moments with my dad. I had to leave at that time. I had promised my family I would be home for them for a few hours because I hadn't seen them in a whole week. I had been with my parents. And so I gave him a huge hug with that. And when I left, I was just so elated. Like I really felt a joy. I just had this knowing we are eternally bonded. And that doesn't make any sense. Like someone's dying. That's the opposite of being eternally bonded in a knowing, right? You kind of have a hope you're eternally bonded, but this was like, no, we're eternally bonded and everything is fine and all is well. And I was so happy when I drove home. I blasted music out the car window and was singing. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Then I started feeling guilty. Like, what's wrong with me? This is not normal. But I felt that joy of just knowing all was fine. He actually took his last breath 12 hours later, and it was in the middle of the night. Actually, I love this. It was it was daylight savings time change here in Michigan that day, so November 1st, 2020. So we didn't even actually know at first what time to write on the death certificate because he died when we're sort of absent of time.
Nice.
Yeah, but I knew he had already passed when I did end up going back to the house later that evening. I almost didn't because I wanted that wonderful experience to be my last time with my dad, but I did go back. And the minute I held his hand, even though he was still breathing, I already knew he was gone. I knew. I remember having that thought, like, this isn't him and he's not here. And that moment I now know was just his soul transitioning. But well, his soul transitioning, and I have sort of the knowing now that that was him and his soul already having kind of transitioned in that moment, giving me that experience. We are eternally bonded and all is well. And it really would be that he just really, that was a moment in which he started guiding me down a greater spiritual path of knowing and understanding. The very next morning, so physically wise, he had died, and it was the very next morning, just 6 hours later, and I went for a walk in a park just to decompress. And as I parked, I finally let some tears go, and they weren't even so much grief as just like release of the heaviness of the week. And as I was letting those tears go, I heard my dad's voice in my actual mind. Now, I thought I was making it up, of course, like my brain is just inventing that, right? But I heard him say, Amby, that was his nickname for me. Amby, you've cried enough tears over me in your life. Get out of the car. And I paused and I remember thinking to myself, gee, I have cried enough tears over my dad in my life, like more than a daughter probably should. There was a lot of tough stuff in my life as well. And we had a nice relationship, but there were tough things. And I listened. I got out of the car and started walking, and I just said, like, to my own self, I didn't think I was talking to my dad. I just said to myself, gee, Dad, I hope you're all right. And without a second hesitation, instantly his voice was right there again in my mind. And he said, I'm just fine, Amby. I'm sticking around here a while and helping some people. And I'm happy about it. And in that moment, I did pause. I like stopped walking because I went, like, clearly I had to have made that up, right? My mind is inventing his voice. But I had this knowing, if I were inventing his voice as Amber, that is not what my response would have been. My response would have been, everything here is amazing, Amber. I'm awesome. I'm with our dog again. Because my dad always hoped that hopefully he would get to see his dog again. My granddad greeted me. That's who he told me he really had wanted to see in life when he hoped when he crossed the other side, rather. Uh, I'm with my parents and I'm fishing and I'm hunting. Like, that's kind of what I would have said. Everything's so beautiful here. I would have never come up with, I'm going to stick around here a while and help some people. So it was kind of like a little nudge, like, I don't know. That's just odd, right? That's how I settled with it. That's just odd. But as the days went on, and then the weeks and the months went on, it's like there was all, it was like he was putting out, what do we say, like dangling carrots in front of me all the time. And every time I would finally believe in a dangling carrot, the path would grow. And so at first it was just signs and synchronicities like we all experience, feathers constantly in my path. I don't mean one, I mean constantly. Signs that we had agreed upon coming to me in super unique and mind-blowing ways. And the more that I would believe, the more I would finally go, okay, yes, I really believe that really is him. The next thing would grow. And eventually I was really just feeling, like actually feeling his presence. It took me a while to pick up on this pattern, but every time that I felt his presence, the left side of my face would itch. But that took me actually about 2 months to finally one day I went, oh, every time I've had this thought, the left side of my face is itching. I mean, this sounds so ridiculous. Like, I love science. I still love science. Um, I was not, like I said, a peace, love, light person. I've always been very kind and loving and intuitive. Um, but I like science. And so this was this was such a fascinating journey, but it was so undeniable to me. And as I would read things, because I was also like trying to understand, I wasn't interested in making it up. I had made so much peace with my dad's death really in the 7 months, 9 months leading up to his passing. And then because of that experience we had, it's not like I needed, my brain needed to hang on. I didn't. I was okay. But I was experiencing so many fascinating moments of presence. And then signs, like I said, like this is a very quick one, but it's just so impactful to me. We had agreed upon a sign with a deer. That's what we agreed. That was our last conversation we had, actually. And I was taking a walk in the park one evening. This was probably 2 weeks after he died. And I sat on a park bench and I was having a moment of grief because even though I had all that amazingness, my humanness is still processing the loss of my dad. And so I was just having a moment of grief and I was just sitting on the bench. And the whole time on the walk, I just felt like I felt him, but I didn't even know why I would say that. I couldn't prove that, but that's what I felt. And so on that bench, I said, Dad, I could just really use a deer about now. And as I picked my head up and stood up to just continue on this path, there was a deer right in my direct walking path, which is part of our agreement, in my direct walking path, just standing there staring at me. I mean, I really probably was 100 feet from the deer and it did not care. Now, there are deer where I live. It's not like, out of the complete ordinary to just see a deer, but it was the fact that I had asked for it in that moment. And there it was in my direct walking path, which is again part of what my dad and I agreed on, not a deer on the side of the road per se. It had to be something extra, and he said, "You'll know in the eyes." And as that deer was just staring at me, I just knew and felt the elation of that. I know this is him. It's not that the deer is him, but our loved ones can use animals to send us signs because animals, unlike us, don't have the overanalyzing, the ego, all the things. Animals are very in tune with the energy of life. And so they're easy to influence. It's not even that they know it, but they're just being influenced where to go, where to walk, where to stop, all that kind of stuff. And so these types of things were just opening a path for me of connection. And every time I finally believed, a new dangling carrot would happen. So as I was believing in all the signs and synchronicities, I started experiencing moments of connecting with him unintentionally in like sleep wake states where you're not really asleep, so it's not a dream, but you're not fully awake. So you're in this lovely state. It's actually such a great place to connect to something greater than ourselves. Why? Because our awareness is simply still there, but we're not in our analyzing brain. It's such a great place to experience a greater reality. And in that state, it's like I would see him, but he would tell me something that I didn't know. And then when I would reach out to like my mom or whoever, it would be true. And that sort of started leading me down a path of reading more. And then I started a meditation journey. And that's when I really started to connect with him very directly. So it's a really long answer. And I probably didn't even fully answer your question, how did I become a medium? But that's important to sort of explain. There's just this path that I just kept being okay with following the nudges.
No, I think it's so beautiful. And I think you made so many important points there. Like we try to analyze the little things that are happening in our lives, little miracles, whether it be like a thought that flashes across our minds or the signs and signals that we see. My mom's birthday was March 4th, and I remember telling her, Mom, I really want to get a sign from you that you're okay. And I was on a walk as well. And a cardinal, which is signs that I get from both parents, actually flew right in front of me, one more footstep, and I would have walked into it.
Yeah.
And so you are right, and we have to, it's like we're learning a new language with our loved ones on the other side, and they're
Yes.
trying to communicate, we're trying to communicate, and the more we believe, like you say, it seems like more progress towards that. And I
Yeah.
really like what you said about your dad sticking around as well, because my dad made a similar statement to my mom. And in the week of her passing, he said he was going to stick around to help us all transition, and then he will, you know, move on, but not in like a ghostly way or anything. It's the way that
Yeah.
you had mentioned.
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things about everything you just said. They're really helpful, I
Okay.
think, for listeners too. One, I love what you just said with this whole idea of sticking around, and I think this is really important. It's not like our loved ones are not moved on or they're in some kind of limbo state. It's not that. I have asked people in spirit, help me understand who we really are. And one time they did this. They just showed me two fists in my mind, and it was like I just knew with it. This is us as human. And then when we pass, we do this. We become unbounded. That was the word they gave me. We become unbounded. And how I saw my dad in the first probably 7 to 9 months really after he passed was that it's not that he's not in a beautiful place, it's that he's taking more of his energy and kind of making it more dense so that I can perceive him, feel him. So he's, if you can think about where we're at in the process of unbounding, everything around that unbounding is just the essence of life. It's the energy, it's God, it's source, it's connection, all the things. And no matter whether you're actually like this in human or you're like this, you're always connected. It's the only thing that's changing is our awareness of that. Um, but for him, maybe his unbounding is like this because he's keeping a little bit of his energy more dense to be able to show me these things and all that kind of stuff. And I find that our loved ones are doing that in mediumship. That's what's happening. I have felt before, and people, sometimes clients will hear me articulate, this is so interesting. It's not like I'm feeling them as sort of this ball of energy in my space. I'll say they feel more ethereal, like etheric. That often happens with, I feel that more with babies, or even someone that had a miscarriage, things like that, which would kind of make sense. They even in life they were kind of, there's awareness state that's a little bit more unbounded. Whereas people that have really lived their human life, they'll present themselves in more of like a dense energy. And when they show up in my space, that's how I know who they were. Dads always show up right in front of me. This isn't some kind of rule. This is just how it works for me. It works differently for different people. Grandparents will always be kind of up here in my corners. I don't see them like they're in my room. There are mediums that do, and I'm very jealous, but I don't see them like that. But I feel it like a dense ball of energy. And so I really don't want people to think that either, whether it's in mediumship or after someone's passed, that they're not in a good place. They are in their unbounded state. When they're able to give us signs, synchronicities, or especially felt presence, that's them bounding a little bit their energy so that we can feel them. My dad made a choice to stay a little bit more bounded while he was leading me on this path. Now, when I connect with him, I actually, it makes me a little sad. I don't feel him in the same way anymore. I still communicate with him, but he feels totally unbounded, super etheric, if you will. Um, so I love that you just made that point. And I love that you talked about the more we believe, the more we can grow. And it doesn't have to be gullibility. That's not what this is about. It's not about just every single heart is a sign. No, it's not. But we know in our hearts when something is a sign, and especially like you described, that cardinal that's almost right at your nose, right? When things are happening in a little bit more uniqueness, with more uniqueness, that's them trying to really snag you and get your attention. Do you see? More importantly, do you feel? Do you feel intuitively this is not an accident?
I love that clarification about feeling because that's what it's all about. Amber, do you think you and your dad made a pact to help out each other, or he to propel that spiritual development for you?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So there, did we make a pact? in some soul form before I was in this life? I can't say that for sure. I don't know. I haven't really asked him either. Possibly. I have, for some reason, in this life, I just meaning in my human form is really what I mean. I am super not interested in any of my past lives. If that's a thing, which I believe it is a thing, but like I don't want to know. I just want to focus on my life here. Okay, what am I going to do about it? If there was some life that was pretty yucky, well, I don't know. I don't want to have that awareness in this life. So if we've had a soul pact in that way, I don't know. I'm sure I'll know one day. But what I do know is that there was a moment in my journey. I was not yet a medium, but I was experiencing full on connection with him in meditative states, evidential connection with him in meditative states. And one day I had this moment. I don't even think I've ever shared this with anybody except my journal. Okay, it's fine. I had this moment where I felt my dad was there, but this wasn't my dad as the like the main being. I just felt probably a guide. There was this group of people and they were putting like a book in front of me. Now, this book is probably just symbolic, right? They were putting a book in front of me and it just came with a knowing. Are you willing to take on a new contract? That was the essence of it. And this is before I really fully, I mean, I'd heard that idea before of soul contracts, but it's not like I was all into this space. And I was looking at this book and I could see that there were so many pages and the pages were just full and full and full of things, but I didn't know what was in the book, like what was on the pages. And I said that. I said, well, but what's on the pages? Like, what am I signing up for? And I just heard laughter in the background. And it came with that sense of, we can't tell you that. And then I feel my dad, and he's right next to me on my side. And I just felt all of the love and the heart. And it was like pulsating toward me. And it was this idea of, what do you think? Are you ready? Do you want to? And I was kind of having this moment of like having a fit. Like, how are you asking me to sign up for something that I don't know what's on the pages? Like, that's not very nice. And then I felt all that encouragement of my dad. Like, this is lovely. You want to do this kind of a thing. This is for you. But I had no idea what that was. And in my moment of just really deepening my surrender and kind of going within my own alignment and saying, is this right for me? Whatever is on these pages. And I just felt this total knowing of yes. And so I sort of leaned over to them and said, yeah, put me in. I'm ready. This is for me. And there was all this cheering and applause. And then I like just immediately was overcome with so much heaviness. It was very fascinating. It was almost like an evidential signal to me that I wasn't making it all up because it was like I could feel the transition between this very expansive meditative state and really like coming back into a human form. This, if you would have told me this 5 years ago, I would have been like, are you going to have to put me, the future me, in a mental institution? Like, am I going to need help? I mean, this sounds ridiculous. We have no idea of the beauty of the greater reality of which we are a part. And we try to analyze everything with our brain with a human experience. It's not that there's some actual book that they're putting in front of my face to sign. That's not it, but it's the symbol of the felt essence that they're using what my human self knows to convey to me. Listen, we've got this whole new contract for you. Are you in? And that's the imagery along with the felt presence that was showing up for me. Um, I still don't know what's on those pages, but I can guess that it's this path of being a medium because even though teaching for me was my identity, it wasn't a job. It was an identity. I loved teaching. It was what I was meant to do in life. But some years later, it finally became, I mean, I still, it's not that I don't identify it with at all, but I was just so identifying with this whole other part of me in a new way of serving. Still being a bridge in teaching, I was a bridge to other cultures. That's a part of my essence, being a bridge to humanness. I'm still being a bridge of humanness and humanity, but now it's uniting a bigger perspective with our human perspective through mediumship and sharing these kinds of stories. And so, um, I think that's my soul contract expanding. And my dad, he's here to help me on the way.
That's very courageous and so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Amber. In addition to hearing from your dad, then you started hearing from other people as well, right? And the whole evidential mediumship grew. Do you have any stories that you can share that includes forgiveness? Because that's such a big part of healing.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll share a couple of things. One, again, before I was saying I was a medium, before I would even identify with that label, once I finally believed, okay, I really am connecting with my dad, I then was moving into connections with others of people in my sphere, but I wasn't trying. It was just happening. So, for example, in one of those kind of sleep wake state ones, I felt this man in my presence that I knew was a dad. And then I had an image of his daughter. So she's not a good friend, she's an acquaintance, someone that I know that I grew up kind of living near and around. And, we were on our list of social media friends, that kind of thing. And so I knew that this was her dad. And he opened a fridge in my mind's eye, and he was like having this joke and this kind of funny expression, and he goes, tell her, don't steal my special juice. And it was really funny. It came with a sense of love, and then that was kind of it. And I reached out to her, and at this time I wasn't always feeling very courageous telling everybody exactly what was going on with me, so I would say, I had a dream. I had a dream of your dad, because that felt safe, right? We kind of all can socially tolerate having dreams. And so that's what I told her. And I expressed what her dad said to me with this fridge in the dream. And when she wrote back, she told me, we had a joke where my dad would make this like juice alcohol kind of concoction and leave it in this big jar in the side of the fridge. And he would always tell me, like, you're not allowed to have it, kind of a thing, even as an adult when she can have alcohol and that sort of thing. And, sometimes she would go over there and, like, get a glass and kind of put it in his face to kind of make a joke, that sort of thing. So it made total sense, and also was really highly evidential. That is something I could never know ever. Um, and it was moments like that that were cluing me into, I really am connecting with people. And once again, as I would believe in things like that, more things would grow. And I took a class not because I wanted to be a medium, because I was trying to understand what the heck was happening to me. And there's a very well known medium who used to be a very high military ranking officer in the US military. Her name is Suzanne Giesemann. And one day, my mom actually sent me a webinar of hers. My mom does not believe in mediums. Well, didn't at the time. That was like, that kind of stuff wasn't on her radar. She didn't even know what I was experiencing. I was afraid to tell her. And she sent it to me one day in a message and said, for some reason, I just think you would be interested in hearing this. And when I listened to Suzanne Giesemann's webinar in December of 2020, I went, this is what's happening to me. This is what's happening to me. And so I signed up for her class, which started the very next day.
Wow.
Yeah. And as I was doing that class, it was like the roof blew open. My contract, if you want to call it that, was like, yep, you said, now we're here. And so I really started experiencing with intention the mediumship piece with intention. Um, it was beautiful, Also, it took me a real long time as a struggle to identify with that word because, again, it wasn't like one day I was like, I really want to try to understand this whole mediumship thing and sign up. And it wasn't that. It happened to me, but I was okay with being the seeker and following the path. Um, and to ask or to answer your question about mediumship that revolves around forgiveness, there's a there's so many. There's so many. Um, One that I will offer is, and why I think this is important and helpful for listeners is because people in spirit, as best they can, they really want to explain their why of things. And most of the time, when we have friction with somebody, it's because we're operating from our stuff, they're operating from their stuff, and sometimes our perceptions are crossed. Even if there really is some harm being done, but it's like how we're seeing it. Sometimes we see, actually, I've developed this whole new kind of definition, if you will, of forgiveness. I know all of us have heard of things like forgiveness is not about you, it's about the other person. Or I'm sorry, it's not about the other person, it's about you, right? That kind of thing. I agree with all that, but I could never like really figure out, well, what do people really mean by that? I get it cognitively, but I don't feel it. Well, what does it mean to really let go? How can I let go of it when this is so hurtful? Even if I'm being nice and I've made a repair with the person, but it still sits in my heart. That, is that really forgiveness? And what I realized from all of these mediumship experiences and my healing experiences with my own dad from my own life is that often what needs forgiveness is not always exactly about the action, even if the action was really harmful or uncalled for. It's about the story we're telling ourselves about ourselves because of that harm. So, for example, say you have a spouse that, was having affairs or things like that. And what story might we tell ourselves about that? I wasn't enough for him to change. I'm not lovable enough. I'm not worthy enough. We might not even be thinking those things necessarily always concretely in our head, but if we really sit with them and wonder what harm is this really doing to me? That's actually what the harm is. It's the story we're saying about who we are because of the harm that was caused. And what I realized was that those are just stories. None of that is really true. That's us operating from our hurt, our things. And so forgiveness is about choosing to not identify with those stories anymore. That's what we mean by it's not about the other person. But we have to let go of the stories we are telling ourselves. So, in a session that I had with a sister, my client, so here on earth, and a brother in spirit, the brother helped him feel all kinds of things about him. He loved like trying lots of different cultural foods and going to lots of different new restaurants. That was just like a real passion of his. Helped me feel his personality, other things. And he brought me to this moment where I could tell that they were at like a type of restaurant type place. It could have been a bar or a lounge, but that type of environment. And the two of them, so the brother and the sister, had a big fight. I felt all that. That's how I described it. You're in this restaurant type place or like a lounge and you're having a big fight and you're telling him about all this harm caused. I can't feel what the harm is. He is not giving it that direct to me, but I'm feeling the essence of that. He's showing me the images. And then in my body, I'm feeling your emotions at the time. You're the one that's angry. You're expressing something that happened. And then he's giving me his emotion. So he literally gives me his emotion in the moment, which was he's dismissing you. He doesn't believe you and he's totally dismissing you. And this was so hurtful to you that you have held on to it all of this time. And it was. She did hold on to it always, even well after that moment. It was just something that a little bit tarnished their relationship. And he gave me his why. So he helped me feel that he was dismissive, and then he helped me feel I was just uncomfortable talking about it. It wasn't something that I felt I understood, and it wasn't something that like I really felt I could navigate. So that's why I just dismissed it. And then I kind of like never really sought to seek your perspective again because I was just too uncomfortable. She interpreted my brother doesn't care about me and he doesn't believe me. And this other person is kind of more important to him than me. That's what she internalized. When actually, that's not at all what he was feeling. But the harm was really great because she was being vulnerable and expressing something, and he was like, yeah, dismissing. Uh, so when someone on earth can know the person's why, it can help to lessen the story we're telling ourselves and then can often allow space to lead to that forgiveness. Why? Because we can let go of the story we're telling ourselves. There's so many healing sessions like that over things big and small, right? That might be seem like a small thing to many people. It wasn't small to her. And then we have really big things, abuse situations, things like that. And I've absolutely had sessions with those who were quite harmful in life and want to express their why. A lot of times I feel, especially when it's men in spirit, a lot of times I feel from them, they help me understand like I had these ideas of what it means to be a man in my head, especially like fathers. I had this thought or these ideas in my head, and being a man meant like, you know, kind of keeping everybody in line and being really strong and maybe like a dad communicating to an adult child still here on earth who maybe was kind of way overly disciplinarian as a kid to kind of almost an abusive state, with belts, things like that. They'll give me their whole sorry. They see the bigger picture. They see the harm caused. More importantly, they feel the feelings of the people that were the recipient of the harm. We're all in life going to feel both positive and negative the impact that we had on other people in various situations. So they'll feel all that and then they're able to share with me like where their head was at in that moment. And it might not have been a lack of love. It might often it's I was so out of touch with myself. I was just doing what mentally I thought it meant to be a dad. Make sure you stay in line so that you can grow up to be responsible in this and the other. Often with men, I will sometimes feel in those types of situations that they really get I wasn't operating from like an aligned heart space. I'm not even sure I would have known what that was, which is really interesting to me.
I really like what you said there, Amber, because in it's generally we're trying our best with what we know best. And when we know better, we do better. Maya Angelou said something like that. And our parents also. And, as when we, as adults, we'll be able to reflect and realize that they were just trying their best as well with whatever level of awareness they have too, and that goes for everyone here on earth. It's not the easiest place. We didn't come with manuals, and so I like your definition of forgiveness because that it's so logical and helpful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Is there anything that you feel is important to share that we haven't touched already?
Yes, if I could sum up all of my experiences in one line, it's this. Every single one of us is already divine, already whole, already worthy. We really don't have to prove ourselves to some being in the beyond someday. Yes, we will um, be allowed to atone and understand and grow from, harms that we have caused in life. But We are very loved and not punished.
I
Sometimes as a human, that's can be like hard actually to kind of internalize. My husband and I have this discussion all this time, and he's like, "But we need justice for people." And it, I think that does exist, but it looks different than what our human brain thinks. When we're in spirit and we feel both the joys and the harms caused, we're not being told we caused this harm. We're actually feeling it. We're feeling the other person's perspective. That brings a whole new understanding. And then we're allowed to grow from that. And so we'll have that atonement, but it's just we're not punished. We are already divine, already whole, already worthy.
thank you for that reminder, Amber. There are three questions I like to ask everyone. What brings you joy and laughter these days?
Oh gosh. Anything that is just a moment of childlike wonder. Anything that is giving me a moment of childlike wonder. Yesterday, it was my little 20-pound dog who was he's trying with his biggest effort to get these little mice that were kind of running into little burrows that were over in this field my son and I were playing basketball by. And it was so funny watching him and meeting my little dog. Um, and it brought me such a sense of joy. And it's such a silly moment. But the more we're really present with life, the more we can allow those moments to offer us the full experience that they're allowing. And it was, seeing this little tiny dog trying so hard to get these little mice, seeing the little mice, even their little butts running across the thing and jumping down into the hole. It just brought me so much joy. And my son and I were just in stitches laughing. And that laughing was also a moment of childlike joy and wonder.
Very nice. What would you tell little Amber who is about to embark on this beautiful journey of life?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still little Amber sometimes who needs to know what's
I
going
love
on with this
that.
beautiful and hard journey of life. Uh, Definitely this sometimes can be a hard one to swallow, but the point of this all is to experience it all. The sorrows, the real difficulties, the joys, it's what makes life life. And from that bigger perspective, once we're in the beyond, and I once heard somebody say, this human form, this is the afterlife. And I was like, wow, I love that. That makes so much sense. Because when we're in the beyond, that's actually when we feel our eternal self. And we look at this life, so me as Amber in this life now, and we just see that as a little blip in time, and that's why we're here. We're here to experience all of it, the full breadth of all the experiences life offers.
That's very profound. What final message or blessing do you have for those listening?
Hmm. I'll just repeat it. You are already divine, already whole, already worthy.
Thank you so much, Amber, for being here with me today. And I hope everyone enjoyed this as much as I did.